Hello ladies and gentlemen, Stephen here from Redolessence and welcome back to another video. I hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much for stopping by. And in today's episode, we're going to be taking a closer look at one of the newest releases by the company Issey Miyake, and this one is called Redolessence pour Homme, Wood and Wood. So make sure to stay tuned. So this fragrance was released in 2019. I had purchased this one a few months ago. As a matter of fact, back in the month of November. I know we're in January now. And I actually wore this when I went on a cruise with my wife. I know you probably watch my channel all the time. I go on so many cruises, but I do like to get away from time to time, clear my head, get into a new headspace, hit that reset button, and I feel refreshed. Well, speaking of refreshed, I do find this to be quite a refreshing fragrance, and this is one that I purchased, I want to say when I was in the Bahamas, and this is one that came out in 2019, and this is a woodsy fragrance, but it also has this refreshing grapefruit note up on top. And you know, when I think of the smell, I also think of the original, which came out back in the mid-90s, and that one also has a citrus appeal to it, but it's a little bit more floral, I believe on account of a lotus flower note, but that one also has the note of yuzu, which is this type of citrus that's used as a garnish in a lot of Asian cuisines. This one doesn't have yuzu, but it has grapefruit, but I feel as though it provides a similar sort of bitter, citrusy appeal in the opening that's also a little bit tart and sour as well. I'm excited to tell you what I think of the smell and how I think this one ranks up to the original, but let's go ahead and start things off by taking a quick and close look at the presentation. So the presentation for this fragrance looks very similar to its predecessors, with the exception that this one uses different colors. But you do have the lighter brown at the top, darker brown at the bottom, and this fragrance is simply called Redolessence pour Homme, Wood and Wood. On the very bottom, you'll see the UPC with the serial number punched into the box if you're looking to authenticate your purchase. And the main woodsy notes are cedarwood and sandalwood. When I talk about the smell, I'll let you know exactly what I get in terms of the woody components. You have the .com towards the bottom along with the ingredients. And the same thing can be said in terms of the presentation for the bottle as well. Looks similar to previous iterations, with the exception that you have this brown gradient towards the bottom here, and you also have a wooden cap. The cap for this fragrance does click into place very securely, but I know that it does have a tendency of being worn out, so after a while it doesn't click into place as securely, so I wouldn't recommend picking this one up from the cap. Your information may be located on the bottom of the bottle, and the distribution on the atomizer is nice and wide. Let's continue with the smell. This one is very bright when it opens up. You are going to get a lot of this grapefruit note, but my nose is also picking up on something that I perceive to be ginger. Now, in full disclosure, I don't fully remember if ginger was listed as a note in the note breakdown, but there's something about it that kind of reminds me of the ginger-heavy version of Dior Homme Sport. So if you've ever smelled the ginger version of Dior Homme Sport that has the CO2 ginger in it, you're going to get something very similar in this one. So it has the freshness of like a Dior Homme cologne, but it also has this spicy backbone that I feel like I can appreciate. Now, I feel as though this fragrance would appeal to people who maybe they like the original, but they don't want something as floral, not something as powdery, something a little bit more of like a contemporary, modern, masculine, fresh territory. I think this one really hits the nail on the head while catering to that genre. And I don't really perceive much of the original Redolessence pour Homme in the background here. So I feel like if you are a fan of the original Redolessence pour Homme by Issey Miyake, this one definitely goes in a much different territory. So would I necessarily recommend this to somebody who's a fan of the original? Not really. And I think that's to be said about all of the flankers coming from this house, with the exception of the summer variants. In my experience, a lot of the summer flankers that I've smelled for Issey Miyake, they do actually smell quite similar, but they take it in like a fresher, more citrusy direction. And while this one also goes in a citrusy direction, I do feel as though the aroma is reinterpreted in this fragrance. That freshness does linger for a long time, and I think that that's certainly one of the strong suits of the fragrance. Typically, whenever you're dealing with a citrus-heavy composition, it's very fleeting, it's short-lived, and you're going to get something that smells drastically and dramatically different just mere minutes into the composition and the way that it dries down. In the case of this one, it is called Wood and Wood, and sure enough, you are going to get some woodsy components that start to come out. However, they don't really make themselves entirely clear. I think whenever you have these benchmark fragrances, like you think of guaiac wood, I typically think of guaiac 10 by Le Labo. When I think of richwood, when I think of sandalwood, I think of Richwood by Xerjoff. When I think of cedarwood, I think of Mr. Marvelous by Byredo, or Cedra Atlas by Atelier Cologne. And those to me are benchmark scents. There are always reference points that I can make when I'm trying to compare other fragrances in terms of how prominently the woodsy notes come across. Here, everything is even keel. Everything is balanced. You're not going to be able to say, oh yeah, I get more cedarwood, more sandalwood. And sure enough, I would go as far as saying is everything about this fragrance is completely synthetic. And so when you're dealing with these singular molecules as opposed to a longer chain of molecules, something more comprehensive and organic in terms of that note's identity, only then are you going to be able to get a more clear and a more full representation of that smell. In this one, you're only getting bits and pieces. And so, do I think it's fresh? Yes. Do I think it's pleasant? Yes. Do I think it's anything innovative and groundbreaking? Absolutely not. However, if you are looking for something bright, fresh, citrusy, but you want to stay away from Bleu de Chanel, Dior Sauvage, or perhaps even the new Dior Homme, I think this is a worthwhile fragrance to smell. But I do think that if you're a fan of the Issey Miyake lineup and you're looking for something that closely mimics the smell of the original, you're certainly not going to get that here. I know another ingredient that's also listed in the note breakdown, which kind of gave me a little bit of hope, is the ingredient of apricot. I don't get anything fruity about this with the exception of the citrus, of course. And so perhaps had it been a little bit more concentrated, it would have added a little more personality to the fragrance. But all in all, not to say it's not a solid scent. I think it's very mass appealing. I think it's very fresh. However, for something that caters to my personal taste, I would go for a few other options before I reach for this one. Let's go ahead and finish things off with my overall assessment. Now, first up, in terms of the uniqueness and the overall smell, I personally don't find this to be a unique fragrance. It really just smells like something that I've smelled before, although I can't quite put my finger on it. But you are going to get this bright, tart, citrusy, grapefruit, gingery thing going on in the opening that is perhaps something you've smelled before in other mainstream designer releases. But there's no denying that the overall smell is pleasant. I would imagine that if you stop people on the street and you have them smell this versus something way more experimental, more indie, more niche, they'll be more likely to pick this as a favorite option of theirs. But just keep in mind that the smell, as far as it caters to my personal taste, I don't find it to be too unique or worthwhile. In terms of the longevity on this one, I got about 5 to 6 hours. This is a fragrance that I actually did wear a lot of. It was full to the top, or more or less. But this is one where I had to over apply in order to get that full feeling as though I'm wearing something that is perceivable and something that I can smell in the air. But the projection on this one was good for about the first hour. Right around that 2.5 to 3 hour mark, it does start to sit very close to the skin. It almost becomes imperceptible right around that 4 hour mark, and I would cap off the longevity at the 5 hour mark, at least to my nose. In terms of the versatility, I find it to be quite versatile. I just wouldn't wear it in the dead of winter. This is more of a hot weather fragrance. I think in terms of occasions, citrus always has this sophisticated, refined appeal about it that I think would work really well if you're dressed up. However, this does come across as more of a casual fragrance to my nose, and it is marketed for men, and just something about the DNA, it does mimic a lot of other fragrances that are also catering to men. And so I would go as far as saying this one leans masculine, but again, I think all fragrances are unisex. Wear what you like. These are just recommendations. And the presentation for this one, I mean, they went with a wooden cap to sort of convey the smell. And I think there's more effort and imagination invested in the marketing than anything else. And so if you think about the name of the fragrance, you look at the cap, you look at the color scheme, you'll be inclined to believe that this is going to be a woody smelling fragrance, but it actually smells more like ginger and grapefruit. And so just keep that in mind. But in the deep dry down, yes, you are going to get more of that woody aroma underneath everything else. My final verdict for this one is I'm not a huge fan of this release. I think it's very pleasant. I think if you're making recommendations to somebody just dabbling in the world of fragrance and you don't want to scare them away, I think this will be a worthwhile fragrance to recommend. However, if you're looking for something a little bit more experimental, a little bit more interesting, something that pushes the envelope, but something a little bit more creative, there are far many better options out there. And I know a lot of people have been talking about another flanker by Issey Miyake called Pulse of the Night. I'm still looking forward to getting my nose on that one, so hopefully I have a chance to do that soon. But as far as wood and wood is concerned, keep in mind those descriptions that I laid out earlier in the review. And if that sounds like your style, definitely check it out. But as far as it caters to my personal taste, I would rather reach for something else. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in. That was my review of Wood and Wood by Issey Miyake. If you own or have tried this fragrance, please let me know what you think. Go ahead and leave a comment down below. Also, if you are new to this channel and you took something of value from this video, I would appreciate it if you could subscribe to this channel by clicking that red button in the corner. This way, whenever I do upload future fragrance-related content, it will get delivered straight to your feed. You never need to worry about missing any of my future uploads. And of course, that includes fragrance reviews just like this, top 10 videos, giveaways, unboxings, special guests, interviews, announcements, and a whole lot more. Thanks again for watching. I love you all, and we'll see you soon. Bye.